There are some basic skills in dealing with people. Negotiation is critical. We think of negotiation as haggling. It's really not that. It's really trying to find common ground and common win-win scenarios in an exchange oftentimes. And that's a creative process. So I think product managers can be really good at that, but it is something that you need to practice. And it is something that we do every day.
Welcome everyone to another episode of the Tech Leaders Playbook. Today I have a very, very special guest, someone that I've known for many years, Eugene Cherny. I did that just for Oded, Eugene. Hopefully he's watching and gets mad and sends me a nasty text saying it's not Gene. Eugene, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. It's really exciting.
So guys, Eugene and I go way back. Eugene is an amazing product executive with a ton of experience in building SaaS platforms and integrating data, machine learning, and user-centric design. He's got a remarkable background from working at massive companies like YouTube, Google, SAP, to a small but ferocious ad tech company called Nativo. So he's got a ton of experience in product management. He's an absolute expert. Gene, I think you and I met probably 13 years ago or 10 years ago, something crazy like that, right? I believe when you were leaving Google, maybe it wasn't that long ago, maybe 5 years ago or so, you were leaving Google and we got you a great product executive, head of product at Nativo, and then we built your teams. Jeff goes way back with your mom. I mean, there's a lot of history here.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think this is all just payback for my mom. So this is
I love
what
it.
are you going to do when your mom tells you to do something?
That's awesome, man. Eugene, let's start with your journey, right? Tell me how you got into product management, and I believe you came up as an engineer. How did you go from engineering to product management, and what drew you to SaaS and ad tech and all that?
Yeah. Well, like I said, I'm a recovering engineer. So I did start my career that way. And I got, there were a few things that led to the culmination of my interest in product. First thing is, when I was studying engineering, I actually paid my way through engineering school teaching fine art, painting and drawing. So I taught fine art and that's how I got paid and paid my way through engineering, which already kind of put me in an interesting category because I was really interested in that design and aesthetic part of my life. But I also was really interested in building things and doing engineering and studying computer engineering. And out of school, I started at a startup. And what I learned at a startup is that your job as an engineer is to do all sorts of things that don't sound at all like engineering. And I did things like talk to customers, and I did things like argue with the founder and talk about strategy and think about roadmap. And I didn't know that was what I was
Product
doing
management.
At the time was called product management. But that's what it was. And so that startup really kind of brought the business aspect into my collection of interests, and with the technology and the business and the design elements that really put together, I think, the core set of skills that eventually grew into product. Now I stayed an engineering manager for a while, and that startup that I was at got acquired, and we ended up at SAP. And then it was then that I made a transition to a product strategy role, and I've been doing official product management ever since. But I have to say, it took me a while to accept that I was going to call myself a product manager. My first experience with product managers, and this has been a long journey, we could talk about it more as an industry, but my first experience with product managers at SAP, we had just gotten acquired, and I had taken probably one of my first trips to Waldorf, Germany. And here I am, I'm on the integration team, lead architect, and I'm there to meet my new product manager assigned to me by the wonderful folks at SAP. And I said, "Oh, this is wonderful to meet you." And he says, "Great. Here, I'd like to show you the roadmap for your product." I thought, "Well, that's interesting. I've never met this person before, and they have a roadmap to my product. Okay, let's take a look at it." And I looked at the roadmap, and I asked, "Well, can you tell me a little bit about where this roadmap came from? Have you used the product?" "Well, no, I haven't used the product." "Okay. So how did you figure out what the product does?" He says, "Well, I saw a couple of recorded demos." "Oh, okay. Great. Well, I see, there are gaps probably in the product. How did you figure out what was missing from the product that needed to be on the roadmap. He said, well, I looked at the competitors' websites and I looked at the things that they were talking about. And so the things that you didn't show me in the demo, I put that on the roadmap. And I said, thank you very much. And I packed my bags and went back to Los Angeles and really didn't think very hard about that product manager again for a while. And that was unfortunately my first experience with product management. But later on, of course, I realized that that isn't real product management. And we certainly found a better way to work together over time. But I think that some of that confusion and disagreement about the purpose of the role has stuck with the industry over time.
Tell me more about that. What's the biggest challenge with product management? What are you seeing out there when it's done improperly?
Yeah, I think what you'll see, and you can probably corroborate this, every company has a different idea of what their product managers should do. There's a different title. You can be a product manager in one place, a director of product in another place, a director of strategy in another place, an owner of something else in another place. And so, and that's just because it's a relatively new discipline. We've had accountants for much, much longer than we've had product managers. I think the other thing is that because the discipline is multifaceted, as I mentioned, you're bringing together the business, the design, the technology, and ultimately you are trying to get the team to do something beyond what they're already doing, but without actually building it yourself. There is a lot of room for misunderstanding, unclear boundaries. And so you have these situations where in some orgs, there are absolutely no boundaries for product people. And basically anything that goes wrong, you have to jump in and jump on top of. That means you're doing demos and pitching in sales meetings, you're writing marketing material, you're doing QA on the software, you're writing the Jira tickets, and maybe the only thing you aren't doing is, pressing the ship button or the, check-in button for the engineers. And so with that kind of breadth, it's not surprising that there's a lot of confusion. And I think more to the point, to take some responsibility as a product leader. A lot of product leaders get into the role because they're great individual contributors, but then they neglect actually teaching the org and building that culture into the rest of the company. And so they don't establish the boundaries, they don't create the collaboration. And so, your team is left becoming the product martyr, doing anything and everything.
Yeah, I think you wrote about this recently.
I did.
Right?
Yeah. I was talking to a product manager, a close friend of mine, who said to me, I think I've had it. I don't know if I want to do this anymore. I was just at work and somebody came up to me and said, what's the metric, product metric XYZ? And I was dumbfounded because I wasn't tracking that metric at the moment. I can understand why that metric might have been interesting, but even if I was tracking it, I wouldn't have had that number off the top of my head. And so I said, I'm sorry, I don't have that number for you. And they looked at me like I was a complete moron. And I thought, how horrible is that, right? Like, I can't necessarily blame that other person because my friend works in an org where, the boundaries of product are not well defined. And there's this feeling that product managers are going to do everything. They're going to do whatever it takes to ship. And honestly, that is a big part of what product does. But when taken too far, I think it can cause real problems. First, it causes a lot of confusion in the org because the organization doesn't know where to go to get what answers. And so what ends up happening is by default, they'll go to product. Then marketing gets cut out of the loop, or sales is missing information, or the operations team is cut out. And so the org doesn't function as effectively as it could. And then these individual contributor product people are getting just bombarded, which means they don't have time to spend doing strategy. They don't have time to spend planning. They don't have time to spend talking to customers. So it's not a great mix in those kind of cultures.
Eugene, what should be the mission what should be the mission of a product person? What should their absolute obsession be when they're working in this role?
Yeah, that's a great question. And when you think about it, like that's the question because uh, they don't write code, they don't sell software, they don't talk about the product and marketing. So what do they do other than get in
What
the
the
way?
hell do they do all day?
Yeah. What do they do? Well, what they do is they help the team make sure that we are shipping the right product to the right people at the right time. That's the fundamental way that the product team builds value for the product through company. And it's long-term sustainable value. I like to emphasize that. So they don't crack the whip at engineering and make them go faster. They make engineering much more productive by making sure they're working on the right things and making sure the things they do work on are much more impactful. So I think that's the product mission.
I find that product management is one of those roles that quickly becomes bastardized, especially at smaller companies, right? Because they want it to be a project management and a product marketer, and it starts blurring the lines, like you said, because
Yeah.
I don't know exactly what you all do. So can you do this as well? Can you do that as well? Can you do that as
Yeah.
well? And it very well quickly becomes a bastardized position. No one really knows what they're doing, and they end up being glorified admins, I guess.
Yeah.
How did you get into the SaaS ad tech world? What made you excited and interested in that industry?
Yeah. Well, starting with SaaS, I mean that's where I started my career building a SaaS product for business, and so there was a little bit of momentum there as I started learning, and you realize there's a lot of really interesting problems. And what I find particularly interesting about SaaS is that it's much harder to get away with cosmetics and flash without the fundamentally solving a user's problem, right? So much of what we do is really about solving some kind of business problem, and that's an approach that I take, right? I'm a problem-solving kind of approach when you think about product management. And I like being able to solve that problem. I like knowing that because they used my tools, they were able to do their job faster, better, more effectively, ultimately making more money. So that's what attracts me to that B2B world and SaaS. Ad tech was particularly interesting because when you think about it, advertising is the business model of the entire internet. It is
Yes.
the thing that runs most of the sites on the internet.
Yes, people forget that quickly, right? Because ad
Yeah.
tech is evil, and ad tech is nobody wants to work in ad tech. And what is the point of ad tech? It doesn't influence the world. It doesn't impact. I don't want to do something like that. We forget without ad tech, there probably would not be the internet.
Yeah, there wouldn't be the internet. And frankly, ad tech and advertising is what keeps the internet free. And look, are there problems with ad tech? Absolutely, there are problems with ad tech. By the way, I bet you've been to a burger joint that served bad burgers. Did you
Never.
stop going to eat burger? Yeah, well, okay. Wrong example. But I
Yeah.
bet you didn't stop going to restaurants after that, right?
No.
There's definitely problems, but I think that there's a lot of value that advertising brings. And in particular, what people forget is that they get all this stuff for free. How does that happen? Now, from a product manager's point of view, why is that interesting? Well, if you think about something that needs to power the entire internet's business model, you're going to touch every aspect of business, technology, economics, design, anything you can think of, you can throw into that bucket of ad tech. It is the most interesting business model, the most interesting technology components, the most interesting product problem you can think of. A great way to cut your teeth as a product manager. If you're starting out, there's a lot to learn in the ad tech space.
Gene, it wouldn't be an interview without us talking about AI and machine learning. Have you started leveraging AI and machine learning in your platforms? And what are some of the instances where the technology significantly impacted user experience and obviously business outcomes?
Yeah. Okay. So, and thank you for distinguishing AI and machine learning. There was a time when people didn't say AI because AI doesn't work, and so everything was machine learning. And then, it was like everything is AI because AI sounds better, but we know that they're not exactly the same thing. So, machine learning has been part of ad tech forever, right? You need to do all sorts of things with machine learning. You need to figure out how much inventory there is out on the internet, how to make sure that Avetis gets the right ad, Eugene gets a different ad, how to make sure that the right creative is shown at the right time. So all of that and much more is all based on machine learning and is something that I was working on from the very beginning. Generative AI is something obviously really new and opens up a whole bunch of new opportunities. And some of the ways that we were able to apply generative AI were in, for example, generating new creative. One of the biggest problems that we found with advertisers is that we knew that creative testing, figuring out exactly different combinations, different ways of saying things to the right person at the right time could really improve performance for ads. But most people didn't have the resources to test all of these different creatives, and they couldn't even generate those different creatives. It costs a lot of money to create images, to create headlines, to create ad copy. So one of the first and basic things we did was allow people to generate lots of different variations on their creative, and that improved performance substantially. Now, other ways that we've used ad tech, used AI, once you've run all these campaigns, you get tons and tons of data. And we do a great job of presenting that data and crunching it and turning it into numbers. But ultimately, human beings need to have some kind of story and understand what those numbers mean. And so we use the AI to turn the numbers into human language that people could understand and interpret and share with others. So there are lots of other ways that the new generative AI can be used, but it's opening up a lot of opportunities for product managers.
Yeah. Eugene, do you, you've worked at some very large companies and you worked at some startup type of organizations and mid-size like Nativo. What were like the key differences of being a product person at a startup, mid-size versus a larger company? Forget your roles. Your roles are obviously bigger in certain places than others. Like what was the key differences?
I think that's a great question. And if you look at it really closely, sometimes it feels like they're not even the same job, right? There's a much bigger emphasis in smaller companies on building, obviously. There's just fewer people, so you're doing more things. There's a lot more breadth to the role. So a lot more of, what we talked about earlier, where maybe you're going to jump into a gap. Sometimes we think of product management as the discipline of the gaps, right? Oh, there's not enough marketing. I'm going to jump in and do some marketing. There's not enough engineering leadership. I'll do a little bit of that, whatever. In a smaller company, there's much more of that. And in a larger company, there's a much bigger issue with alignment. In larger companies, I find that you're almost doing more to manage the org than you are to manage the product. Negotiating with other teams, getting other teams' commitments to build something that you're depending on, getting the resources and justifying the next iteration. You're constantly doing that. So in many ways, it's a very different job. So those are just some of the differences between large and smaller orgs.
What was more fun for you?
I'd have to admit I enjoy the smaller org environment. I like being a builder. I like being able to flex my muscles in different ways and get involved in other things. And I have a bad habit of not knowing where my lane is. So even if you did tell me not to do other things, I would probably do them anyway. So
less siloed.
Yeah.
Less siloed. More opportunities for impact, more opportunities to experiment and make moves, right? Let's talk about leadership and product development. How do you foster an innovation within your teams? Now I'm thinking as a product executive, especially when starting a product team from scratch. So if you were to start a team tomorrow as a head of product, what would that look like? And how would you foster the innovation amongst that team and the organization?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. Certainly, it starts with hiring the right kind of people who are problem solvers and have a natural empathy for customers and want to connect with that. And obviously, people who have a rapport and credibility with the technical team, because without them, we can't get anything done. The core horsepower has to be there as well. We need to have bright and analytical people working in product. And certainly flexible people given that variety. So once you start with a great team, I think the other important thing is to get those folks into situations where they have direct access to customers and hearing from those customers, understanding what the customer pain is, and being able to pattern match across lots and lots of situations. I think that gives people the direct inspiration that they then bring back into the organization, bring back to the engineering team, provide that context, and then help the group as a whole to synthesize that into innovation and into a great product and a great roadmap.
You know, what's interesting, what you said, Eugene, is it starts with the proper hiring. I just did an episode on innovation with Nicholas. I'm obviously not a product guy, but one of the things I talked about 25 minutes about all the different pieces of innovation and culture. But then I went backwards and said, but you got to hire right, because you could talk about all the innovation in the world, but if you don't hire people that are able to think innovatively, then you're going to have a really tough time trying to get innovation out. And of course, all the other stuff, collaboration and the intellect and knowing the core product well before you can innovate, right? So you heard it, guys. It's all about really, really good hiring. You got to get the right people in the beginning versus trying to change people, right? Versus convincing them. So Eugene, I'm gonna ask you about folks that are aspiring product leaders or product managers. A lot of over the last 10 years, product management has picked up a lot of steam. People have really been excited about become product managers because they've got engineering mindset. The problem is they need to talk to people and they like the business side of it. So a lot of times I recommend them getting into product management. But let's talk about product leaders. What advice would you give to young professionals who aspire to lead product teams in tech companies? What should they be thinking and what should they be doing?
Yeah, well, I mean, they've already started with core product management skills. So that's important. I think one of the things that I didn't do enough of earlier in my career is really thinking about how I apply my craft, articulating what I do, and coaching others and teaching. And so this is something not only that you have to do as a leader of product people, but also something that you have to do with the rest of the org, right? You're constantly trying to explain what you're doing, why you're doing it, what the value is. And so getting that practice early, I think, is really helpful for someone who wants to get into a leadership role. One of the ways that you can do that is by identifying other people that might want to become product managers and working as a coach with them, as a sounding board, and hearing them out. Certainly finding mentorship opportunities helps with that as well. I think there's a lot more of an emphasis on presentation, communication, and product has a lot of that as well. So there's already that raw material, but finding even more opportunities to present, communicate, get involved across as many other functions as they possibly can. So you naturally do that as you go up in product management. But if you're at a lower level and maybe you're in a role where in an org where the product management function is really siloed, you may look for opportunities to work across functions. Go talk to sales, go talk to accounting, find out what makes their job easy or hard and what motivates them and what's important to them. I think also getting a sense for, there are some basic skills in dealing with people. Negotiation is critical. We think of negotiation as haggling. It's really not that. It's really trying to find common ground and common win-win scenarios in an exchange oftentimes. And that's a creative process. So I think product managers can be really good at that, but it is something that you need to practice. And it is something that we do every day. When someone comes up to you and says, I need you to build something, and you know that you already have a bunch of commitments and that thing can't be built, but maybe there's some value and you need to talk. That's negotiation. So I think working on negotiation skills is really important. Learning to provide good feedback is really important. And as a corollary to that, building good one-on-one relationships with people is really important.
Yeah, because as a product manager, you rarely are talking to people that report to you. Right. A lot of times you manage no one, really.
Yeah. So all of these things, unlike in engineering, where you could go a long time in your career and completely ignore these skills. I mean, in product, you have to be exercising at least baby versions of these skills from day one.
Nice.
So I think that actually moving up the ladder and building up these skills over time is easier because you have more practice. So that's what I would say about learning the leadership game.
Great information. Speaking of innovation, with innovation comes a lot of failures. Can you share a moment in your career that was particularly challenging and how you turned that situation around? And again, it could be an innovative process, or it could just be just a very challenging situation.
Yeah. I'm gonna, you know what, I will share with you. So there are some lessons as a product person that you learn, unfortunately, over and over again that you should never have to learn even the first time. One of those lessons is that the product is not the thing that you build, it's the thing that your customers use. What does that mean? Well, if you think about it, once the thing is built, there's a lot that needs to go into a customer actually using the thing. They need to maybe have training. They need to have documentation. They need to have a support system to use the thing. They need to be able to ask somebody questions if something goes wrong. If you haven't thought through those other steps, then the perfect product may very well not succeed. And there was one product launch that we did that solved the problem. We thought, oh, it's just beautiful. Like it does exactly what we think it needs to do. It has all these extra features. It has all these capabilities.
Yeah.
And we launched it, and then we realized that our internal teams there were too many features, too many functions, and the internal teams were not able to make use of all of it. And so even though every demo we would be able to show, hey, oh, you want to do that? Yeah, you can do that, no problem. When it came to using it live, even our own internal teams couldn't set it up and support it properly for the customer. So we went back to the drawing board and did something that's really difficult for product people and also engineers to do. We started removing things. We started to simplify the product.
Keep it simple.
Features, keep it simple. We removed features. We made it simpler. Every time a seller would say, but a customer asked me about that feature, we'd have to go in and find out, like, was that a deal breaker for that customer? Were they just asking a curious question? We would have to have those difficult conversations. Say, no, well, we think that we can remove this feature and it's going to save a lot of complexity and it's going to get people from time to value really quickly. And it's going to save our own teams the support costs that we were seeing. So that was an instance where the product answer was actually removing a bunch of stuff to make the thing successful.
Wow. The word KISS, keep it simple, stupid, right? Keep the product simple and let it solve the key issue. You can add the bells and whistles later if people really love the product, right?
Yep.
That's interesting. So your whole job was to remove features, which is usually the opposite of a product person, right? That's the whole point of being a product manager, is to add features and ship them and sell more and all that.
Well, I think that removing features is just as important as adding them. This is one of those things where the rest of the org doesn't understand, why this would be important. But if you're a product person, and certainly if you're an engineer, you recognize what happens when products become bloated, they get overbuilt, and the features, first of all, you have a problem of coherence, right? There's so many things that nobody can understand how they fit together. And so your customers start to struggle with the product itself, even though, again, the features are in there. Then there's an issue of maintenance. Every single new feature you add, you need to maintain, not just one time, but forever, as long as anybody is using that feature. And so we've seen this in so many other pieces of software that we use. Think about Excel. How many of the features of Excel do you use? And now think back, how many times have you gotten annoyed because a feature that you don't use is in the way of something that you do?
There's a product, I won't speak of it, I use that we bought because of a really cool feature they sold us on. The truth is that feature never really worked. And it left a little bit of a sour almost taste in my mouth. Because as someone that doesn't know, I would ask you why. If I don't like the feature, I just won't use it, right? As a customer. Yeah. And to me, no, that feature sold me. And now you can't deliver that feature. Now I'm a little annoyed. A little bit of bait and switch, even though that was not the intention. That's kind of what I feel, right? That's all I remember is the fact that was the deciding kind of factor, and unfortunately, it was never really a great feature. It didn't work the way that you had sold it. You got to be careful
Right.
there too.
Oh, that's a big issue with products in general and in B2B in particular, where there's when you're not clear on what you do really, really well, but you still have great sellers, and we hope that you still have great sellers. They're going to find a way to connect with the customer, but then at the end of the day, the product and engineering team is left holding the bag because you haven't empowered the seller to know who the right customers are to target. They did their job, they sold the product, and now you've got a customer that is a misfit for what you built. So sorry, on behalf of the rest of the product world, that you had to go through that.
Eugene, how do you feel about using LLMs to generate the PRDs?
Um, I feel triggered, quite honestly, and I thought you weren't going to
That's
ask
why I
me
did
that.
it. That's why I
I
did it.
am,
I wanted to trigger
I'm
you.
a little upset. So yeah, I've been vocal about this recently, and I'm glad this came up after we talked about the fact that I've used AI all over the place, and I'm actually really bullish on AI. But I have noticed lately a lot of sort of offhand suggestions on Twitter and other places that, oh, you could just use an LLM to generate your product requirements document as a product person, and won't that make your life so much easier? And I actually think that A, that's a bad idea, and B, a lot of product managers who think it's a good idea are actually victims of a poor org structure that is encouraging that. Let me explain why I believe that. So ultimately, the value that we add as product people is not writing things down. Writing things down is not the thing that makes products better. Um, and if you're writing things down that nobody reads, or you're writing things down that aren't actually built into a product, or you're writing things down that doesn't help the team get more efficient, get smarter, get more aligned, then you're just doing a performance. What's that performance for? Well, I've heard somebody describe it as proof of work. How else am I going to prove to my boss that I really did something? Gosh, well, if that's the only way, then I think you might have a problem within your org,
Yeah.
right? If you're generating a bunch of paper that nobody reads in order to prove that you're valuable within your org, I think that's a problem, and that's something to talk to the product leadership about. There are even more practical issues with using LLMs. Part of this process is of generating requirements and generating roadmaps is actually bringing and synthesizing information from real customers, their real pain, their real needs back into the org. Your LLM has not talked to your customers. It doesn't know. It may have some corpus of information, but it's not talked to Avetis and asked him, what was that one feature that was really, really important to you? That's golden information. That one line of that was the most important feature would have been the thing to take back to the product team. And your LLM doesn't know the answer to that question. The other problem is that the LLM is too good. It will fill in every single answer. If you ask it, how many customers do I have? It will tell you. If you ask it what my competitors are, it will tell you. It may be completely wrong, but it will tell you. And we know that product management it evolves. It's iterative. We learn over time. It's actually a good thing to leave things blank in your doc. It's a good thing to know what you don't know. And when the LLM fills everything in and it looks nice and shiny and you feel like your work is done, you may have just been led down a garden path. And that's really not good. So those are ways that it can go really wrong. And so I would advise product folks to ignore the people that say this is the easy button for generating a bunch of text that nobody else will read. If you work in that org, I'm sorry for you. Maybe this does make your life easier. Maybe this is like some way of dropping a pile of paper that somebody says, ooh, that's impressive, and you can move on to do other things. Okay, I can respect that you need to do something practical, fine. But if you think it's actually going to make you a better product manager, not that way. How can it make you a better product manager? There are actually ways that it can make you a better product manager. Let's think about some ways that it's actually going to help. We spend so much time compiling notes from customers. We talk to customers, we make notes, we think about how to synthesize. Well, you now have a tool its whole purpose in life is to take a bunch of text and summarize it. So now all of a sudden, maybe you take all of your customer calls and can use an LLM to summarize and pull out important bits. And then, of course, you can go back and reference the original one. Again, you're not abdicating your responsibility as a product person. You went and you had the customer conversations. You brought back the information. Now you're using the LLM to sort, sift, and organize. That's great. That's a fantastic way to use the tool at your disposal. Maybe you've written the PRD and you're thinking, gosh, maybe there are some adjacent markets I should be thinking about, but I don't have any good ideas. Ask the LLM. Yeah. Say, here's what I've got so far. What are the adjacent things I should be thinking about? That can trigger ideas for what other research to do, who else I should talk to, right? There's critique as well. LLMs do that pretty well. Here's what I'm thinking already. Tell me what's wrong. Tell me what questions I haven't answered. Tell me what might be confusing. Tell me what I might want to know. Again, LLMs are great. There's a new group of companies out there that's also trying to help you prototype, which I think is another fantastic way. Why? Because I hate communicating in text. What do people like to see? Pictures. Wouldn't it be wonderful if you can describe a picture to something and it will generate it for you? Well, guess what? Now there are tools that will do that as well. So now you're actually using the LLM to produce something that is helping to communicate, not taking away your ability to communicate or doing it for you. So I think those are all great and productive ways of using AI in product management. I just am very, very careful about how it's applied.
You can't basically, it's not the end all. It's a great research tool. It's an asset that should be utilized, but it should not do your job for you. Or
it's not a
within a
for
short time frame, it will literally do your job for you and you won't be necessary. Would you agree?
Well,
if you're not careful.
So I don't know. I've had this discussion with members of my team as well. And I'm going to say something. Don't tell the engineers. If there are engineers watching, they should probably, but we see a lot of automation of the actual construction of software and code happening already. What we're not able to automate yet is the judgment that goes into deciding what should be built and when. And that's exactly what the product person is doing. And so I actually think the future belongs to product people. I think there's actually going to be a lot more that product managers can do. In fact, I was recently talking to a company that is AI-based company, and their product managers are actually able to use their own AI agents to build software.
Wow.
So directly coming back from a customer, hearing customer feedback, building that software directly through the AI agent on top of the foundation that the engineering team has built for sure, but shipping without ever having to touch the core product. That's pretty amazing.
Wow. Okay. So engineers, watch out. Product people, let's go.
Yeah, I don't know. Again, they can turn the camera back on now.
That's incredible. That's really interesting way to look at it because I was going to ask you the future of product management. It sounds like it's still bright because there's always a concern, right? Things are being automated and AI has already made a small impact. And what's it going to look like in 5 years? Would you guess?
Oh my God, I think so. I'm very bullish. And let's separate the sort of superhuman intelligence world. I don't think anybody can predict what's going to happen when AI is smarter and there's more AI than humanity, and that's in the future, and I'll let others pontificate about that. But in the short run, I think what AI is going to do is going to make a lot more projects possible. There are product managers everywhere going, every product manager has an infinite backlog, okay? The number of things that you want to do are approximately infinity, always, on every product. There's a bunch of stuff in that backlog that you've decided is really important, but I don't have the technical expertise. I don't have the team. I don't have the technology doesn't exist yet. I don't know how. All of a sudden, all of those questions can be answered with the LLM. There's all sorts of new kinds of projects that can be undertaken. So I actually see a world for both product and engineering and companies in general, a world of abundance. I think a lot more projects are going to get funded. A lot more products are going to get shipped over time. There's going to be a lot more features and a lot more excitement happening, and it's just a richer experience in products over the next 5 years.
This is a weird question I should be asking you offline, but might as well do it on the air. HireCloud, technology consulting and recruiting firm, where should our focus go? I mean, we've already have a team that solely focuses on AI hiring, right? Computer vision and robotics and autonomous driving and all that stuff, machine learning. Where do you see the needs going to be where the supply and demand is in the favor, right? Creating opportunities for a company like ours?
That's a great question. I think that there's definitely going to be a lot of low-hanging fruit in the short run in areas like customer support and data analytics and improving user experience that AI can immediately be used to improve. And so there's probably a lot of orgs out there going, I know that this is possible. I know that, that I'm seeing other people do it. I'm seeing other people provide better customer support and better documentation or doing a better job of visualizing or understanding data. But I need help. So I think that's one area of like getting in there and providing that kind of reinforcement. I think there are probably other things that over time will develop where potentially a lot of job functions might get outsourced in interesting ways where, you'll be able to connect with the knowledge bases of orgs and be able to process that information from the knowledge base and produce new knowledge, new information that, you wouldn't have been able to do before, wouldn't have been practical to do without being in-house. So suddenly now you can outsource those things.
Interesting.
So, yeah, I mean, I think that there will certainly be opportunities. The world is evolving so quickly that probably ask me the question tomorrow and I'll have a different answer.
Yeah. No, for sure. It's funny. I don't know if you saw the Tom Brady roast, but Nikki Glazer, I think her name is, said, I mean, when you look at this guy, he looks like AI, but without the intelligence. It's hilarious. Great line. She kept clowning on the player's intelligence, right?
Vetus, I have two major career limiters. Unfortunately, one is football and the other one is golf. So I don't do either one, and all I can
golf,
do is
I
apologize.
Understand, but football, come on.
I'm sorry, basketball made for me.
Nice, Eugene. What's next for you in your career?
Wow. I really enjoy being a builder. I really enjoy building products, teams, businesses, and I'd like to do that again. I think I still have plenty of energy for that sort of thing, and I'd like to do it again. When I think further down the line, I've enjoyed writing on LinkedIn, and I've spent a lot of time talking to product managers, and recently started coaching some earlier product people. And I've enjoyed that too, as well as advising. So I think maybe longer term in my career, I'll do more of that sort of thing, more coaching, more advising, a little bit more flexibility in my life. But I think right now, I'm pretty excited to build something new again.
You've been doing some advising and some consulting and things like that. It sounds like you're ready to go back into a full-time role if the right opportunity came about. Is that right?
Yeah, for sure. There's something about doing fractional work. I think it takes a certain kind of personality, and I'm not a good mercenary. I tend to get obsessed about products, right? Like, and becoming obsessed about 3 different companies doing 3 different things at the same time is really hard. So
it's just not the mentality of a consultant, right? They are hired guns, like you said, mercenaries to solve a problem, move on. And there's a time and place for that. But I don't think you're that guy, like you mentioned. I think you spent, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years at Nativo. Before that, you were at YouTube, Google for a long, long time. So you have a deep, stable career, and I think you enjoy really making a long impact, sounds like.
Yeah, for sure. I like to adopt the products that I work on, and it is really hard to
Nice.
do that in a short run. Yeah.
What's the last question? What is the something you're most proud of building that's had the biggest impact?
My kids.
Ah,
Was that not, sorry, that was
no, that's beautiful,
not
man. It's
what you
all about
meant.
the
No.
kids. This is why we do this anyway, right? I
That's
see the
right.
beautiful family in the background.
That's right. Yeah. Um, I certainly have a lot of pride in how I started my career. And why is that? Because I knew nothing. I had no idea what I was going to be when I grew up, or what kind of impact I could make. And very grateful to the founders of the company that hired me, took a chance on me, and then made some really questionable judgment calls about letting me do all sorts of things I probably shouldn't have done. And then that leading to an acquisition. In fact, that product that we built is still in service. I'm shocked,
Wow.
but the documentation is still up there on SAP's website, and it still has customers. That same code that I wrote, it's still running
Wow.
somewhere.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it's like B2B software, right? Like it just has this, once you've got a customer base, it's got a long
That's
lifespan.
it.
So yeah, I'm pretty proud of that. I'm also really proud of the work that I did at Nativo, because we really built that entire product management function from the ground up, and the team. And it's such a fantastic team, such great people. And the product is, I'm really proud of the results for the product. And we always get really, positive comments from users and partners. So, and even internal folks at Nativo. So I'm really proud of that work as well. I'll pick two if I'm not allowed to pick my two kids.
Beautiful. Oh, you did great. Typically, Eugene, I like our firm to represent you exclusively. That's typically what we do. But this time I want to open it up to the world. If somebody wants to get a hold of you for whether it's advice or it's to potentially get the opportunity to hire you, how do they find you?
Oh, sure. You could reach me at eugenecherny.com. That's
Easy.
me, M-E, at Eugene, EugeneCherny.com.
There it is. There it is. And if you're too shy, hit me up and I'll do an introduction myself. Gene, you've been great, man. Thank you so much for being here. This was a lot of fun. I feel like this is one of our normal conversations anyway. We just filmed it this time around.
Yeah, we should always film our discussions. This
We should
has
film
been a
every
pleasure.
conversation. That's it.
We should film every conversation, and I appreciate you letting me ramble on about product. I get very excited about talking about this gig, and I really enjoy it. So thank you.
We've learned a ton from you, brother. I appreciate it. Thanks, Eugene. Have a great one.
Bye.
And that brings us to the end of another great episode of the Tech Leaders Playbook. I want to thank you for joining us and hope you took away some valuable insights to apply in your professional journey. Don't forget to subscribe on your preferred podcast platform so you don't miss out on the next great conversation. I promise it'll be good. If you enjoyed today's episode, we'd appreciate if you could leave us a review. Your feedback not only helps us improve, but it also helps others discover the podcast. Better leaders mean better working environments. Better working environments leads to happier people. Remember, a rising tide lifts all boats. I'm Avetis Antaplyan, and this has been the Tech Leaders Playbook. Keep leading, keep learning, keep giving, and I'll see you on the next one. Until then, stay inspired, my friends.